To decarbonize or not to decarbonize? That is the question. Canada is at an economic and legislative crossroads. On February 12, 2026, the US EPA rescinded the 2009 CO2 endangerment finding on legal and scientific grounds. The EPA admits that the endangerment finding was not based on evidence, and that the EPA now finds that ambient CO2 does not endanger human health. This EPA ruling had set in motion layers of regulation in the US and Canada based on the thesis that carbon dioxide and a handful of other gases posed a threat to human health, and any production of them by industry or personal vehicles must be stringently regulated. This led to burdensome costs for all industries, but it fell heaviest on car and truck manufacturers. In fact, the CO2 endangerment finding was the rationale for the promotion of the electric vehicle market, as well as the implementation of the much-hated stop-start cycle on new cars to reduce idling. In the press release, the Trump administration says the final rule will save Americans over $1.3 trillion by removing the regulatory requirements to measure, report, certify, and comply with federal GHG emission standards for motor vehicles, and repeals associated compliance programs, credit provisions, and reporting obligations that exist solely to support the vehicle GHG regulatory regime. Americans will have certainty, flexibility, and regulatory relief, allowing companies to plan appropriately and empowering American families. The US EPA CO2 endangerment finding is gone, but it set the basis for governments in the US and Canada to define the social cost of carbon, the foundation of the carbon tax. Canada's social cost of carbon, and thus our consumer and industrial carbon taxes, are directly linked to the US legislation. Except that's all gone now. With geopolitical upheavals and trade tariffs, Canada's auto industry has been crippled by market uncertainty. In Bait and Switch, the Carney EV mandate, retired energy economist Robert Lyman shows that the recent new EV strategy of Prime Minister Mark Carney further complicates the intertwined Canadian and U.S. auto manufacturers' relationship, taking Canada's regulatory regime in the opposite direction of the U.S. Likewise, in The Invisible Industrial Carbon Tax, a second new report by Robert Lyman, he shows that Canada's industrial carbon tax is imposing untenable burdens on industry and consumers, who always end up paying the trickle-down cost. With the Canadian and American economies joined at the hip, is Canada going in the right direction, pressing on with decarbonization? The Canadian Climate Institute, a mostly government-funded charity, issued an op-ed claiming that, for Canadians, decarbonization is a patriotic act. In fact, decarbonization and net zero climate policies have led Canada to the brink of economic disaster. Time for a rethink, Canada. Human health has greatly improved thanks to modern medicine, only possible through the use of fossil fuels. And climate disasters have dropped off the scale. Likewise, which is more deadly, cold or hot weather? From this Financial Post article, in Canada, not surprisingly, cold is more than 12 times more deadly than heat. Every year, about 1,400 Canadians die from the heat, but more than 17,000 die because of the cold. And what if carbon dioxide is beneficial? What if the price on carbon should be negative? Warming significantly reduces the sum of space heating and cooling costs. CO2 is greening the planet, increasing crop yields and providing more shade for animals. Warming also reduces some extreme weather events like tornadoes, as the frequency linear trend of EF3+ tornadoes have declined 53% since 1955. The social cost of carbon is based on temperature projections that falsely assign urban heat island warming to greenhouse warming. The urban heat island effect warming likely contributes up to 50% of the land warming trend. To save the country, to save Canada, we must save the economy. Join Friends of Science Society in the race from net zero